Right, let's see if we're live. Let's do the normal, Mopes. Let's do the normal. Right here, up and going, Mopes. Guys, I'm here with Luke Moseley. Part 3, final part of our endurance coaching workshop. And I'm here, yes, Mopes, we are there. We're there. We are live. Guys, any comments, please feel free to put up. I've got my dual screen system here, or my phone just down there. Mopes, today our rough agenda was to talk about advanced training, and we've talked about training zones, and before that we talked about getting started, and then we were talking about how people could use their time wisely in our 1 hour a day kind of social physical distancing exercise time which we've been granted. So today was about kind of how we can fine tune things. And when my memory of last week's session, my main memory was with our energy, with our training zones. We got our training zone from 1 up to 7, but you had this simplified manifesto of 3, 1 being like an active recovery, 3 being an aerobic-y kind of thing, and then 5 or 1, a base, a medium, and a high kind of training level. So just recap us on that, Mo.
So, yeah, of course. So for most people, so last week and the week before, we talked about people starting on endurance exercise, perhaps for the first time. So where they've been, regular attendees to your facility, but then under these current conditions, they can't get in and they're looking for different things. Obviously, the weather's been great, which has been a blessing. And so they thought, right, I'll start riding, I'll start running perhaps, and I just need a little bit of help and support. And we talked a lot about not rushing into it, a lot about walk-run programs. And then we also talked about different training zones, and there's loads of different ways to look at training zones. And if you're a beginner, it doesn't really matter how you look at it, as long as it provides you with a little bit of structure and helps support your gradual development. So I talked about 3 different zones, easy, medium, and hard, 3 different gears that you've got. And in that beginning period, if you were a beginner, just go out and feel those different speeds, go out and sense what it's like. And something that's well documented is that the more experienced of an endurance athlete you are, you're better able to finely grade your different paces. You get a better sense of pace structure. You're able to better pace your workouts and your efforts. So we talked about those 3 different zones for beginners. I think people who are a bit more used to it, who've been doing the cycling improvement program a few times, perhaps for a few years even, they'll be more dialed into a range of different zones and a range of different intensities that they can work at.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mopes, with I'm trying to post up a couple of sessions on here, but I think when people go out on without having the watt bikes or without having a power monitor or heart rate monitor, I think a good we were talking a little bit last week, and a good thing to expand on now is riding by feel, if that makes sense. Riding by what kind of thing. So I'm trying to put pictures up, guys. So if you are watching now, we've got a few people engaged. I'm trying to one of the first sessions on the program which you designed, series 1, session 2, 3 blocks of 10 minutes, zone 3, Mopes. Yeah. So when people are out and about on their bike, what can they expect to feel if they're trying to get good benefit from this session? What should they be feeling, Mopes?
So if we're working around a zone 3 tempo, there's lots of different ways to describe it. I'd be looking at something to describe something that could be sustained for a couple of hours. If you're an experienced runner, zone 3 tends to be your sort of, if you're a good runner, your marathon type pace. You should be sensing that you're working, but you shouldn't be breathing excessively. You should be absolutely in control of your breathing. For a 10-minute zone 3 workout, there shouldn't be any real increase in sense of fatigue. So you shouldn't be getting a lactate build-up because you're below lactate threshold. So it should be comfortable, but the way I describe it is purposeful. You're not trying to escape from a dog. You're not in a race. You're just trying to get to where you want to go in a purposeful manner. It certainly isn't easy, but it certainly isn't hard. And that's where people find it quite difficult. Now, I've got a Borg scale up here, and I know you've got Borg scales in your gym, in your facility. So on the Borg scale, you're looking at something that is in the sort of 4 to 5 range, where 4 is sort of hard, 5 is hard. Different Borg scales, different interpretations use different language, but you're looking in the middle there. You're not sort of moderate, but you're just a little bit more, but you're not feeling that breathing get out of control, and you're not feeling that burn, that lactate intensity increase.
Yeah, cool. So one of the things we talked about before was the fact that people always regress to mean, or they revert to type. So this is the kind of training where, how can I say it, some people perhaps don't value it because it's kind of like maybe they don't feel like they're working hard enough. Okay.
Yeah.
What's this doing to that person? How's it benefiting them, Luke?
So your zone 3 type training we're describing, or the zone 3 training that we're describing, covers almost every base. It's one of the most efficient places to train. And a good quote about zone 3 training is, if you do a lot of zone 3 training, you'll never win a race. This is, of course, talking about competitive athletes, but you won't be last. So it gives you a really solid aerobic stimulus. It gives you a way that stimulates loads of different physical adaptations without giving you any of those real tools to actually smash it, to actually kind of drop people if that's what you're willing to do or wanting to do. In terms of regressing to the mean, ironically, this type of training is what some people with a certain mentality, not a negative mentality at all, but they go out and they train. They go out and they think, I've got an hour, I'm just going to pedal, I'm just going to push. And zone 3 is sort of what you could sustain for that kind of period. And for those people, then probably this isn't the right session. They need to be looking at going harder, or maybe going a little bit easier. But for those people that are either going out super easy or doing hard intervals, zone 3 is a great filler to create adaptations without causing too much fatigue.
To add some icing on the cake for this period of time, then, Mokes, it's also a good way of training while not stressing or depleting the immune system as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you did a lot of this, if you went out for 3 hours in zone 3, or tried to do 3 hours in zone 3, and certainly if you didn't fuel your immune system with appropriate amounts of carbohydrate, yeah, you'd get a knock to your immune system. But something in terms of an hour, no. As long as it wasn't a completely novel stimulus to you, I think you'd be all right.
So, guys, just for those of you online now watching, I've actually just posted up the Bjorg rating of perceived exertion chart. Okay, so you can that and have a quick look. And Luke, if you just don't mind, just now we've got the chart up there. If you just don't mind recapping.
Yeah. So if you got, I can't see your Facebook. So if you got the 0 to 10 or the
0 to 10, same as we got in the facility, Max. Yeah.
Fine. So what you've got with your Borg scale, hang on, I've just closed the one I needed. 1 second. Wait for it. Where are we? There we are. So if you looking at your Borg scale, you've got your initial stages of 0, 1, 2, where it is easy. 0 is obviously rest, that's sitting in your couch. 1 and 2 is really easy. So you're just walking around, just moving. And if you were doing active recovery in between a set of running intervals, for example, so just walking, then that would be your 1 and possibly your 2. Although 2, you're starting to break into moving now. 2 might be easy jogging, relaxed jogging. How are you feeling? Yeah, this is easy. And then you begin to progress through moderate and sort of hard. And this is where the subtle bits of zone 3 come into play. It might be moderate if you were doing zone 3 for an hour. It might be sort of hard if you were doing it for sort of 15 or 20 minutes. It could get into hard if you're doing it for maybe 15 minutes, 10 minutes. But then once you get to the top end of sort of hard into hard, you're getting close to threshold type training. Yeah. Remembering, of course, that this is a continuum. You're not in one place or another. You're around a zone. You're around, you're getting a range of physiological adaptations. So it's not like I must ride at this speed or run at this speed or ride at this intensity. You're obviously covering everything. Once you get through into really hard 7 and 8, the orange zones, you're really looking at threshold training. That's where you do get a change in your breathing. That's where there is significant discomfort. That's where your body is saying, do you know what? Slow down. This is uncomfortable. When you get on into 9, then you really are working. These are short intervals of 2, 3, or 4 minutes. And this is where the Borg scale is quite difficult with really high efforts. And obviously 9.5 to 10, they're your sprint type efforts.
Yeah. I like, I think one thing about training, how can I say this? It's, I'm trying to get my words out here, Mo's trying to get my words out. So with zone 3 training, it's kind of it's huge amount to be gained, and there's, what you got to realize, I think, for a lot of people is, if you go out and you, as Luke said, you go out, you're not going to win a race, but you're not going to lose it either. I like that, because it's kind of like there's a hell of a lot of benefit for staying in this zone, Luke, isn't there? Okay, there's one thing about the cycling improvement program and about training over recent years. It's shifted from a very, you've got to go out for hours basis, to a more intensity driven, Chris Carmichael, Lance Armstrong's old coach, his book was The Time Crunch Cyclist, etc., etc. So you don't always have to be out pushing yourself and pushing yourself and pushing yourself. You can go out for an hour, you can be working a 4 or 5 out of 10, and you can come back and you can put your bike away and not feel absolutely knackered, and have had a really effective session.
I think if you're going to do, yeah, absolutely. I think if you're going to do zone 3 and you've got an hour, so you're not intending to go and smash it, that's fine. But you've also only got an hour. So, you can't get those longer aerobic adaptations that come from, being out on the road for longer. In case, I think you need to be looking at blocks of 20 minutes plus in zone 3 to really start to reap any benefits from it. I use shorter blocks in the course of a long ride, like a 4 or 5 hour ride, where you could be, you've obviously got accumulative fatigue, and then a 10 or 5 minute block of zone 3 at the appropriate time can work. Yeah. I think if people think they've got an hour, then you need to be a block of 20 minutes of this kind of work.
So and that's interesting. One of my clients, Julia, Julie's been with us about 4 months now. She's been doing a CIP with me on a Wednesday morning, and she let the cat in the bag. She said, I'm doing the workouts in the morning, the strength sessions, then I'm going out on a bike. And she wants to maintain the benefits she's been getting. Her aim is to keep up with her husband on a bike. And I said, just tell me a bit more about how far you're going out. She said, well, I'm just going to do an hour. I said, well, have you got the inclination to maybe be a bit focused when you're using that hour? That's exactly the session. So I think that's series 1, session 5. And guys, what I'll do is I'll post these the CIP sessions up, or link to it. I'll get James on the IT, and we'll post those sessions up for you. But series 1, session 4 or 5, I think, is 2 blocks of 15. So by the time you've done a warm-up of some degree, 15 minutes, then you do your 15 minutes with maybe a couple of minutes break, and you do 15 minutes again. Before you know it, you're into a warm down, and you're back down your drive, back down the road.
The best place to do it, is on a gradual hill. So you don't want a steep hill, you want a gradual hill that gives you that resistance to work against. And the best one locally isn't far from your place, actually, in Rotherwas. It goes up from, there's a little hairpin before Home Lacey, and it heads all the way up through Bogmarsh and up onto the top of the Callow. And I'll post a little GPS link through to it so people can see it on a map. And that is, for most people, it's at least a 10, depending on how fit you are, maybe a 15-minute climb, and you can just use that to provide the resistance from the bottom all the way to the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, guys, don't be scared off when Moke says this kind of thing. He is different to most of us. Okay, so I'm thinking of that Bogmarsh climb. I'm not thinking zone 3, mate. But
as long as you got the gears and you're happy to back it off, and that's the thing, is it can be a temptation of, here's a hill, I need to go at it. But if you've got the gears and you can click, 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 and you're happy to let your cadence come down, then you're getting more of a neuromuscular stimulation. Yeah, of course, if you haven't got the gearing, your power is going to go right up. But if you have got the gearing, maybe even got a mountain bike, then you get a great long climb out of it.
Okay, so we've got a couple of workout ideas. Then we've maybe got 3 10-minute blocks, okay, with a couple of minutes in between. Okay, and the thing is, with these blocks, the blocks want to be the same on the rating of perceived exertion, don't they?
So you don't, and this is where power is really useful, is that you don't, as you get more tired, your power for your perceived exertion changes, of course. So but over this period of time, you should be all right. What you want to make sure you don't do is start too hard and then fade, or the last one is worse or better, for instance. And I think the big part of this that it's important to communicate is that these sessions, especially if you're a relative newcomer to this kind of training, is about learning. You're learning, what is my intensity? How does it feel? What can I sustain? That sort of stuff. So yes, what you're looking for is even blocks, and that 3 times 10 minutes works really well as part of a structured process. So I talked before about 20 minutes being what you need. If you get those 3 times blocks with just a little rest, and you make sure that the cadence is there so that you're not, the little rest gives you a chance to reset your sense of effort, So you can try and do them and hold them at the same intensity. Heart rate is again very, very useful as well.
Yeah, and from what we'll ask you guys to do out there is, what we've got to do then is bridge the gap. So all we're trying to do in these sessions here is almost like stretching dough out, about kind of like building up the volume, about how you can sustain that. So from the 3 blocks of 10 into the 2 blocks of 20. So you're maintaining the intensity, and you're just increasing the volume. That's the whole idea. Okay, so Mokes, when we look then to maybe progress things, and we're doing we got our 3 levels again.
Yeah.
If let's say for the person who's been doing the cycling improvement program with us, we just got on to series 3, and we were doing 1-to-1 ratio of work to rest. So it was like 2.5 minutes up, 2 down, 3 minutes down, and building up to about 6 or 7 blocks of that kind of work.
Yeah.
I'm guessing for that kind of work, we'd perhaps need some flatter terrain to start off with, so we can replicate things.
What you don't want is a downhill. A downhill stuffs that kind of session, because you can't generate the power against the resistance. So that is where hills work really, really well. Again, because you're working at a higher rate, you can generally get the gearing to work on a hill. So that sort of stuff I almost always do on gradual hills. And then at that point, we're working into what I would call zone 5, your anaerobic capacity, and then we're working up to 8 and 9 on the ball scale.
Okay,
we're at that point. If people are in that phase, and what I was going to say when I thought about this discussion, and people who were experienced cyclists and certainly had done the cycling improvement program, a different type of training that they could bring in, and this is segueing a bit, and I'm happy to come back, is sprint training. And it's very rare that, unless you're a racing cyclist, a super keen lycra clad, all over it, like me, it's rare that you do structured sprint training. But actually, sprint training, because it's a new stimulus for many people, you get really significant gains, both in the power that you can generate, but also in the confidence and bike skills that you have from short sprint training. And so that's something you can bring in with just 5 or 10-second efforts. And we can talk about that a bit more later if it's appropriate.
And I think for the vast majority of our clients, I think they're probably going to, they've probably got their roots they know and like and trust, especially this period of time where they perhaps can't go too far from home. And I would say to them, give it your best stab at implementing some structure, like mentally rehearse the route you're going on, and think, right, I can push here, I can ease off here, I can push there and ease off here to best replicate the session in hand.
But it doesn't have to be perfect. And it's something that I used to struggle with when I was very first coach myself. And that was, after I'd been cycling for 10 years, I'd get the session, which was 5 minutes of this, 4 minutes of that, 7 minutes of this. And mentally, I'd really struggle to do it out on the road and not hit those numbers and times. It felt like it wasn't working. And actually, it's not like that. It isn't like that at all. What you're looking for when you go out on the road is an acceptance that it's not going to be perfect, in air quotes, but it's going to be great. And so it's just got to be close enough. Done is better than perfect, and the intention is what really, really matters. So as long as you're not smashing it when you shouldn't be smashing it, or going too easy when you should be going steady, that's absolutely fine. As you say, rehearse the route in your head, know where you're going, say, I can do this here and that there. And if you come home and it hasn't been perfect, you know what? You've been out and you've worked.
Yeah, and I think that's it. A lot of this will get taken care of by the profile of the route, if that makes sense to some extent. All you've got to kind of maybe do is work when there's work to be done, but then rest when there's rest to be had, if that makes sense, rather than trying to level that profile out, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's where you talked earlier about regressing to the mean, where the session is supposed to be on, off, on, off. And what people do is they kind of wobble around here in the middle zone, which isn't necessarily bad training, but it isn't what you aim to do. And actually, there's a sense that everything ends up just in that middle ground, that grey area. And for people who are, as you use the phrase, time crunched, it's actually more efficient to go on, off, on, off. It gives you more of a chance to absorb what's going on. Obviously, you're focused when you're working, but in the 5 minutes you're not, look around at the world. Lambs have just been born.
Yeah, well, I said this to my client on Saturday morning. I thought, I'm not sure she goes out on a bike. So I said at the end, don't forget to obviously be safe when you're out doing these sessions. So I think that's a message, guys, is obviously, as you said last week, Moach, it's great out there at the moment. The volume of traffic's low, etc. Well, I think we've got more tractors than the cars out on the road at the moment.
But the roads haven't been fixed. There's some big potholes out there, and I think your point about roads that is really, really valuable. You know when there's going to be a gravelly corner. You know if there's a bad bit of surface. So definitely make sure that you think through or recce in advance. Of course, if you're going to do it, that's where a hill's really good because you're obviously going slower when you're working. If you're trying to work on a gradual downhill, you're going to pick up a lot of speed. And the other thing that's worth saying for those people that don't cycle a lot is don't just pull your bike out the back of the shed, get on and crack on. Bike shops are open. They are essential services. So make sure the brakes work.
Who'd ever not service their bike? Yeah. There might be some comments below from Wayne Davis. I think you actually, before we close down, Mokes, I think you actually texted me and told me what needs doing to my bike is it'll have been downstairs. It seems to be fine, but okay. So Mokes, that's great. Let's go back to zone 5 then. So zone 5, we can work in zone 5 up to what's the kind of, how long are we going to be able to sustain that for, mate?
If you're an absolute legend, I think you could possibly do 6 minutes, but I never set more than 5 minutes. And for the vast majority of people, I do 4. 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off is enough for almost everybody. And if you're comfortable with doing maybe 5 sets of 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off, I know the cycling improvement program goes a bit further, but some people who maybe have got used, they haven't quite pushed themselves to the test. Actually, the powers they've got towards the end are relatively easy as they've developed. So that's why I went for 5 minutes. For most people, 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off is enough. And once they feel that they can manage 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off, what I generally do is 4 minutes with a surge in the middle or a surge in the end, which where you lift it up and bring it back down, and that creates extra load on the body, extra stress. So yeah, 4 on, 4 off. Start with 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off, and maybe do 4. Judge what you're doing. Judge how far you get up the hill or the power you can hold. Make some kind of judgment. Work maybe another session, 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off times 5. That gives you 15 minutes of work. 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off times 4 gives you 16 minutes of work. And then that really is your sort of foundation at that point. Most people don't get further than 5 sets of 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off. That's enough for almost everybody, unless you're serious about racing.
Yeah. And again, I think the thing is here is the clarity on the difference on how you feel when doing these sessions from a zone 3 session to a zone 5. Zone 5 is uncomfortable, Mokes, isn't it?
Without a doubt. If you're doing them right, you don't want to do them. I think if you're doing them right, if you do 5, the first one, the fourth one, and the fifth one are the worst. The first is bad because you haven't warmed up those systems. Even if you've done a good 20-30 minute warm up, you haven't done those systems. And for really top athletes, I do a throwaway effort at the start where it's almost there but not there, just to get that warm up out of the way. So the first one will be quite unpleasant. You'll be thinking in the last, if it's a 4 minute effort, from 2 minutes onwards, you'll be counting the seconds. And again, this is where you shouldn't be looking down. If you're doing them out on the road, you shouldn't be looking at the tarmac. This is where a climb's great, so you're going slower. It's a safer environment. Certainly for the last 30 seconds, you should be counting the half seconds. It really does need to be quite hard. And if you need a bit more than 4 minutes recovery, then you've got to take that. You need to take that. And certainly if you're new to this time of quite high intensity training, please do start with a 2 minute and then a 3 minute. And then, just get a sense of what it's all about. Your breathing should be uncontrolled. You should be breathing very hard. You certainly couldn't have any kind of conversation whatsoever. And at the end of the effort, call it 4 minutes, you couldn't continue up the hill. You'd need to stop, grab your breath, turn around safely, obviously, and roll back down. Try and spin your legs. But yes, it is hard work. But for many people, as long as they've done a little bit in advance and are healthy, then it's okay. It just needs to take time getting used to it.
Yeah, and I think exactly the same message I had to, again, my client on the weekend who I talked to. It's taking the feeling of what you're working when you're doing the cycling improvement program out onto the road, but bearing in mind the route you're doing with the surface. It's like we're doing what we call a needs analysis, isn't it? It's kind of like look at the extrinsic factors around you at a time. Look at the environment. What's the road? It's like up at Brockhampton, where near I live, they've been muck spreading, and they're kind of like the road surface. You wouldn't want to be doing a zone 5 work through that.
And remember that by taking that perfect session, in inverted commas, out of the gym, out of the watt bike, at that point, all you need to do is pedal. You shut your eyes, you take your hands off, you've got no brakes, you've got no gears, you just pedal. And then you're taking it outside. Actually, although you feel like you're losing something from the intensity and quality of the session, you're gaining handling skills, you're gaining the sense of riding your bike and working when you're tired and handling it when you're tired, drinking when you're tired, cornering when, all those other skills are coming in at the cost of a little bit of power. But you know what? When you really want to ride your bike, if you're doing it towards an event or something like that, that's what really matters. You can be the world's fittest person, but if you can't go around a corner, there's no point. So allow that power or that structure to go a bit, and you're going to learn other stuff.
Yeah, and I think good point there you said about like drinking on the go for some of our members starting off on a bike and things. The zone 5 is not the time to start learning to take your hand off the bar and grab a drink and look down between your legs for the water bottle, is it? It's kind of like, this should be focused, shouldn't it? With zone 3, it's kind of like, yeah, fine. You got your wits about you and you've got time to react. The zone 5, okay, you might be traveling slowly if you're doing it on a hill, okay, but if you're doing it on a flat and you're pegging it along, then there's not much margin for error.
No, not at all. Zone 3 is something I would do with other people in a structured circumstance. If I trusted them as riders, we'd do a zone 3 session around each other. Zone 5, I wouldn't. There's too many variables. It's not safe enough to do that. So if I did do it with other people, we'd get to the hill, we'd split up and do it individually and then ride home together. Clearly, that's not in these current times, but to give you an idea of the other things that I would think about, I wouldn't do a zone 5 session around someone just because I don't think it's necessarily very safe. I'm very concentrating on what I'm doing. I'm right on the edge of physically of what I can do. Any spare capacity, I'm focusing on the traffic. So, that gives you an idea of what you're needing to take into account.
Mokes, that's great, really great. You touched on something, so I'm just going to come back to it. You said about and this perhaps goes up into what we would call zone 7. So we're going away for our structure maybe a little bit here, but I think this is a really good session to be had at this moment in time because, again, going back to the time crunch, if we're doing some sprint training, again, masses to be had from this because one thing we both know as coaches is that people do not know what they're capable of doing, especially in the early days. Okay, and even sprint training is still something we don't see many cyclists going and out doing with purpose now. You don't have to go far from home. It can be super time efficient. And there's what's to be had from doing some sprint training, Dr. Mokes?
So really what you're doing is training zones that most people wouldn't train on the bike unless they're specific racers, really. So you talked about, our zones and zone 7. Zone 7 is neuromuscular power. So that's when what you're doing really is improving the brain's ability to talk to the muscles. And cycling, if you think about it, if you ride 100 miles or you ride for an hour, whatever, and you're doing maybe 80 revolutions, actually the force with which you're pressing down on the pedal is very, very low. It's a lot less than a step up. Imagine doing 80 step ups a minute for an hour. It's just physically not possible. So the actual force that you're pressing down with on the pedals is very low. And as a result, when you're cruising around, you're not actually using many of your muscle fibers in your leg. It's the complete opposite, of course, to weight training, where you need every single one of those muscle fibers in your leg to lift the weight. That's the stimulus that you're looking at there. Cycling is completely at the other end of the spectrum. The force that you're applying to the pedal is absolutely tiny. And that's fine. That allows you to ride for ages and ages, why the bike is so magical and incredibly efficient. But what it means is that unless you train your brain's ability to turn on all those muscle fibers, you're not going to be able to turn on all those muscle fibers. So how do you do that? And the most effective way is what I would call a stomp or a seated start effort. So you need your bike to be in 100% working order for this. You don't want any traffic around and you need a very, very smooth road. So if any of those things aren't right, don't do this.
But what we do, can I just add in your health as well? Okay, guys, this is if you've got any, I know most of you have been through a screening process, what have you, but if you're not feeling up to scratch, guys, and you've got underlying health conditions,
this is one of the most physically demanding things, even though it lasts maybe 10, possibly 15 seconds if you're confident. So what you do is you put it in quite a big gear, a hard to pedal gear. You have your bike set up, obviously you check around for traffic, you almost come to a stop. So you're going very, very slowly, but you're in a very, very big gear. And then, boom, you go as hard as you can. So if you're in a car and you did that in fifth, the car would stall. It couldn't turn the engine around. for you, a stall means the cadence is very, very slow. So the cadence is so slow, so you have to push incredibly hard on the pedals to make headway. That requires every single one of your muscle fibers. It requires your core to be engaged. It requires your arms to be engaged. It requires everything in total mental focus to drive the pedals. Now, as you speed up, the cadence gradually increases slowly, 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 slowly. As you get faster, the cadence increases. And so what you're doing is you're first of all training that neuromuscular power in that first sort of 5 seconds. And then as the cadence increases, you're then training your coordination, your ability to control your muscles in a smooth sense to hold that cadence all the way up. And if you're good, up to 120, 130. Start out with maybe 10 seconds of that, and don't look at your watch. Don't look at the watch to wait for 10 seconds. Pick something that you think is about 10 seconds away and look what you're doing all the time. And then you need at least 5 minutes rest before the next set, because effectively what you've done is a monster squat leg press set for 10 seconds, and you need 5 minutes to get over that. And I would start off for your beginner with maybe 2, possibly 3 10-second stomps in the course of an hour's ride, with a 15-20 minute warm up, 15-20 minute warm down, and like I said, 5 minutes between. So that's the first way to train that.
So a good time efficient way to kind of like integrate these to start off with would be, just like you said before, you could actually do them rather than an isolated session on their own. So sprint training on its own is quite okay. You don't need to go far and all the rest of it, but it's like you've got a 1-to-6 work to rest ratio there if you want to really nail it. So you get 10 seconds work, and then you've got crikey, 5 minutes rest in between. So you were saying earlier on, coming back to that, if it's something you're not familiar with, then you could put it on the end. Let's say, for example, those 3 10-minute blocks. You could put one stomp on the end of each one of those.
Yeah. So what I do there, and that would work really nicely, is so let's say 5-10 minute warm up, 10 minutes of low zone 3, then roll, then finish your 10 minutes of low zone 3. Make sure you're at the right bit of road. Put a stomp in. You've then got 5 minutes recovery to the next 10 minutes. A little, maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes after the 10 minutes to get yourself set for the stomp, do the stomp, etc. like that. Yeah, that would work. I wouldn't do the zone 3 straight into the stomp. I'd get settled, make sure you're safe, make sure you're in the right gear, etc. It takes time to prepare, then do it, and then and that would work fine, because the zone 3 and the stomp use completely different fuel systems, and it's fine to do them that way.
Yeah.
Mentally it's tough. And I find stomp workouts the ones that I subconsciously avoid. Because they need such mental commitment. They're hard in a strange way.
Yeah. And I think my message here is to a lot of the guys watching and tuning in would be to ease your way into them. Like Luke's a highly experienced endurance athlete. He loves putting himself in a pain cage, got loads of experience on the bike, etc. Okay, just by going and trying this and finding out about it, you're probably doing something you haven't done before. And therefore there's stuff to be had, low hanging fruit. So it's always looking the benefits in probably what you're not doing. I always say, and it's kind of, if it's kind of, and I'd even go back to the guys who've done a half marathon recently and things like this. So again, when you go and do something like this, don't go absolutely bloody crazy, because, there's an increased risk with anything which is, pushing that hard. So, and the same with our kind of like marathon runners and half marathon runners, anybody, a recreational athlete, it's just easing your way into it to a certain extent, and then you can access the magic. That makes sense.
What I often suggest is, for people who aren't necessarily familiar with the type of training, is take the session that you think you want to do, go and do half of it at 10% lower intensity or sense of it. So with the stomps, rather than go out and do 4 stomps, I'd say, right, in the course of your next ride, do 2 stomps, but don't give it 100%. Give it 90% and see what happens. Do your gears slip? Because you need to find that out before you do a proper stomp, else you end up over the bars and on the floor. So, find that stuff out. Does it niggle an injury? Before you go and think, right, now I'm going to do this amazing session that I've read off the internet or Luke's told me about or whatever it is. So go and do half the session at 10% lower intensity, and then you get a sense of whether or not it's achievable.
Yeah, do a dummy run first. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Mopes, I don't believe it. It's 25-3. We've been on here for the 35 minutes already. Time has absolutely flown by. Mopes, I'd just like to thank you for the last three Thursdays, the 2 o'clock. Great. I think we could talk forever, me and you. But mate, that's great information. So much appreciated. Guys, they'll be available for you on our Facebook page. But Luke, is it okay if we put them on YouTube? Is that all right, mate? You okay with that? Okay. And we can link real endurance coaching into that as well. So as I said before, guys, Luke's a real endurance coaching. If it is your thing, if you do want to plan for doing an event a bit more than what we can offer in our CIP, which Luke was the guy behind the cycling improvement program, please reach out to us and we're more than happy forward you Luke's details. I think Luke's probably working with 2 or 3 of our clients now in the background, doing all sorts of events. I'm not sure what Rich is up to this year. Well, it's probably like a caged at the moment, but anyway, so Luke, once again, thanks very much for your time.
Anytime.
We'll catch up soon. Cheers.
Take care, mate. Thank you. Bye-bye.